Welcome to the SCI Forum podcast. This podcast was produced by the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System in the University of Washington Department of Rehabilitation Medicine. The Northwest Regional SCI system is dedicated to improving the lives of people with SCI through excellent patient care, research, and education. To learn more about our podcasts and videos or to make a donation, go to sci.washington.edu. This podcast was taken from a live SCI forum. You can watch the video on our website or YouTube channel. Go to sci.washington.edu/videos.
Hello and welcome to the Spinal Cord Injury Forum. My name is Jeannie Hoffman. I'm a rehabilitation psychologist here in the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine at the University of Washington. Tonight we are actually presenting the second of two forums on emotional adjustment, depression, and resilience after spinal cord injury. Last month my colleague presented on research and what we know about patterns of adjustment after spinal cord injury, and tonight we're actually talking to the experts, of course. We're very pleased to welcome three fabulous people who will be talking us through their personal journeys from kind of where they came from in terms of their initial spinal cord injury, the adjustment that followed. And so we have Lan Remy, Kenny Salvini, and Doug Noctegal. I'm going to start by talking to them and asking them a bunch of questions, and then I want to open it up at the end for other questions from the audience, and they've told me they're willing to pretty much answer anything tonight. So thank you all for coming. So I want to start out by just giving a little bit of background on each of them and their injury. So Lan was injured about 4.5 years ago. He was in a bicycle accident and has a C6 complete injury. Kenny was injured back in 2004 when he was 23 years old, and he was in a skiing accident up in Snoqualmie, and he has a C3-4 complete injury. And Doug at the end looks like he might be paraplegic, but he actually has a C2 tetraplegia that actually was incomplete enough where he really functions as a T4 paraplegic. And he was injured back in 1994 when he was hit by a drunk driver. He and his wife were driving, and thankfully she wasn't injured. So tonight, I want to start out by just really talking about those early trajectories that Dr. Bombardier talked about last month in terms of kind of how that process started. And maybe, Lan, we can start with you if it's okay. And really, I'd be interested to hear about your early adjustment, the period of kind of being in the hospital, and even that point at which you finally realized that maybe you weren't going to be walking again.
Okay, thanks, Jeannie. I was at Harborview. I was taken to Harborview from directly from my accident scene, and I was in ICU for a week. Did have surgery the first day I was there, and then I transferred to rehab, where I spent 6 weeks learning to adjust and adapt to my injury and new challenges. Probably the first stage was denial and disbelief, and coming to trying to understand and accept all the things that I couldn't do. I found myself reaching for things and not being able to pick them up, and I think probably one of my low points was I was still in ICU, and I don't know how many people like to drink Ensure, but they gave me this can of Ensure, and I said, okay, I'll drink that, and I spilled it all over the place. I thought that was my lowest point, spilling the can of Ensure everywhere. But it was very startling, very shocking. I was married and still am. I had 2 sons in college at the time, and so I had a lot on my mind about what was going to happen with the rest of my life. I was employed, and I was concerned about what was going to happen with my job, and supporting my family and all those things. So I went to rehab and began a 6-week stay in rehab. And the physical therapists and the physiatrists and the occupational therapists just came in and started their work. And, while I was feeling like this was the strangest thing in the world, they were acting like it was pretty much an everyday thing. And they took me through the paces of learning, growing, and gathering new skills and steps, and well, not literally steps, obviously, not steps, but progressions into becoming functional enough to get through each day in rehab and when I got out.
Yeah. So you talked about a couple low points. Did you ever have periods where you thought maybe this isn't worth it, maybe it's not worth going on?
Yes, certainly. And I think mostly in the earliest stages of rehab, when I think I kind of thawed out a little bit from the surgery and thawed out from some of the very heavy pain medication I was on, and realized what the challenges were. I in my mind I was thinking, this just isn't worth it. This is too much. I can't do it. I don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. And what got you through those?
Well, there was counseling. There was a counselor there. There was I think she was not an intern, but a resident counselor, and she was available. And I went and talked to her. Her desk was kind of outside my room, and I did have a chair they provided to me, and I rolled out and I said, I'm just having thoughts here that this isn't worth it, that I don't really want to go on. I think I need some medication. And she said, oh, and then she said, well, do you have a plan? And I said, well, no. And so she came back and talked to me a couple of times, but right after that, then the physiatrist, Dr. Crane, dropped by in one of her little closed-door sessions and said, everybody feels like that in this stage. And or she said almost everybody. She said she knew of one person that had gone through and didn't seem to feel like that at all. And it made me feel like it was pretty normal to feel that way. And I think from that point on, I started moving ahead. And of course, my family was very helpful, and my wife was around and very encouraging, and she made it known that she fully expected me to get back out there and back on my duties as a spouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Kenny, will you tell us a little bit about your story and how those early years really for you were pretty tough?
Yeah, for me, I think the trajectory was a little bit slower of an arc than probably Land's was, because I was 23 when I got hurt, and I was about 8 months out of college. I just got hired on to work with the radio stations in Seattle, and it was like 5 days before my job was supposed to start that I was up in the terrain park and hit a jump going too fast. And so, yeah, I woke up in the hospital, and yeah, similar to what Land was saying, is I was fairly heavily sedated, and I was on a ventilator for I think the first 2 months that I was in-house. And when I first woke up, I was like, I was slightly understanding what the doctors were saying about the prognosis, and for me, I hadn't had much education as far as spinal cord injuries had gone that early, so I was like, okay, if I can get my arms back, I'll be good. And I'd seen a lot of wheelchair sports and all that, because I was a competitive wakeboarder. I wrestled in college, so I was pretty well rooted in my physical abilities, and so if I get my arms back, I'll be okay. And I think it wasn't until I got to rehab, and there was a great peer counselor named Dick Sage that has a class, and he kind of steps you through all of the realities of spinal cord injuries and what return looks like and what a reasonable expectation is. And that's kind of, for me, when it kind of set in that it wasn't going to be, I wasn't going to walk away from this, I guess. So, yeah.
So it was a rough go early on.
Yeah, and similar to Lan, I had those thoughts, and I even had a couple plans of my own, but I've always compared it to that movie Castaway, where Tom Hanks has to throw that thing over the edge, because I was always, if I was going to try something, I was terrified I'd do it wrong and end up in a worse situation, and for me, my arc took a long time. I was probably 5, 6, 7 years before I even left the house. So I spent most of the time as a shut-in. I never really left my room, let alone the house, unless it was like a doctor's appointment or something like that. So, yeah.
In all of those years, Kenny, did you have people specifically ask you about your mood? Did they specifically ask you about whether or not you thought about ending your life? Did they ask you about your plan?
I don't think anyone actually did. I had a counselor in Good Sam that we just didn't really mesh with his style of counseling. And so, I think the people that were around me kind of got it. They understood that it was kind of a big loss that I had to go through, and I kind of had to mourn that guy that I was. And so, yeah, for the most part, it wasn't really talked about, but,
Do you think you would have been open to it had somebody actually wanted to talk to you about it?
Then probably not. I really looked at it kind of as an adversarial thing, that there wasn't anything out there for me in the world. And so, yeah, I had counselors come and try to talk to me about antidepressants and stuff like that. I'm like, a pill's not going to bring my body back. So this is something different. And so I think I was probably a little bit more closed off than the next person might have been. So, yeah.
So you said 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. What changed? What was it that caused you to actually get some help or change the way things were going?
Well, for me, I finally got uncomfortable enough. I think for the first probably 6 years, I spent half that time stuck in bed with pressure sores, and I'd had one pair, I think 6 months after I got hurt, kept me in bed for about a year, and then I got healed, and I still didn't want to leave the house. I didn't really think there's anything out there for me, and then I came down with one that kept me in bed for 2.5 years, and that was kind of, the turning point, that it was like, okay, if you don't want to leave the house, now you don't get to. And from that point, I was like, I don't care. I need to get out of this place. And so I think that was the big turning point, was just, the pain got high enough that I didn't want to do the same thing over and over. So.
It wasn't that at that point either that you got some actual counseling that was helpful or antidepressants that were helpful. It took even some time after that.
Yeah. I got into a relationship and kind of used that relationship kind of as a crutch, and she kind of helped me get out there and do life, and I kind of fumbled my way through it, but then my family was really gracious about it too, and so it took a couple more years before I even got more open to seeing counselors or any of that stuff too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doug, how about you? Tell me about your early, it's been a few years.
It's been a few years.
Yeah, quite a few years. But tell us about your kind of early trajectory. What was that like for you from early on? You were married only 3 months when you were injured.
Yes, ma'am. I was injured on September 11th, 1994. I was married to my wife for 3 months. We left my best friend's wedding, and we were on our way home after the wedding, stopped at a stoplight, and drunk driver ran in the back of the car we were sitting in. So I got ambulance down to Harborview, came in as a head injury, and they did an MRI and found a pocket of fluid on my spinal cord. So then they went in and drained that off and did surgery, and then we went to ICU for a month. And then once they moved me down to rehab, it was a little different to get used to. As Kenny was saying, you're 23. At that time, I was 25 when I broke my neck. You got the world by the tail. You think that you can take the world on. Watch this, right, Kenny? That type of thing. So to go be a high-level quad at that time, I could slowly start pushing a manual chair, but I was in a power chair most of the time. So just learning to deal with that whole concept of going from 6 foot something tall to being 4 foot something tall. So doing speech therapy, because I had messed up my head pretty good. So going in and out of speech therapy, one day I ran into TBI, traumatic brain injury, that was coming out of speech as I was going in. And I told the speech therapist, says it's really too bad that that's not fair that guy can walk and I can't. And she goes, he can walk, but he has no clue where he's at. At least your mind's there. The poor guy didn't know where Harborview was. So that was a big turning point for me. It was like, okay, at least the mind's still there, as little as it was to begin with.
Did any of you guys have issues with depression before your injury? No.
I don't believe so, ma'am.
And I was going to say, that's one of the things that actually bodes well for, a good trajectory. But I'm curious about, you mentioned that in inpatient rehab, Doug, that you were there for a while. How long was your length of stay?
I was in there for 5.5 months, which is unheard of in today's day and age of rehab insurance company.
Lan, you said 6 weeks, right?
6 weeks.
Yeah. And Kenny, you're somewhere in the middle, I bet.
I think I had a little over 2 months.
Yeah. What do you think that being in there for that time helped or hurt in terms of your adjustment and your ability to kind of move through some of these stages?
I think it helps because time will heal the wounds and let you mentally get prepared. You can go from, again, being 6 foot something tall to being 4 foot something tall in Lan's case, 6 weeks. Okay, the therapists and the doctors are doing the best job that they can to teach you how to function as they tell you to. But you got to learn how to pick up a can of Ensure, how to pick up a soda, how to transfer. They can show you physically how to do it and mentally, work with you on how to do it. But until you can wrap your head around it and you can either watch somebody else in the same situation as, this is how I do it, you can get this low to the ground to get your head up, to get your back up to move over and everything else. So at that point in time, I just had more time in the hospital to cope with what was going on. And I think that's what's sad about the healthcare being removed from the hospital so fast.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Did you have episodes where you kind of wondered if you could go on and what you would do?
It's been so many years. I'm sure that they were there. I mean, without a doubt. I was married for 3 months, so I really questioned how I was going to support my wife and my family, as Lamb did,
Yeah.
So it was definitely different.
Kind of didn't know where that was going to turn, what that was going to turn into.
Exactly.
I started and I realized I didn't follow up. At what point, Doug, did you realize that it just wasn't going to get better, that you weren't going to just walk out of rehab, like so many people often say?
Well, right. I think that's what, it's just a human thing, Well, I'm going to do it.
Of course.
Prove me wrong that I can't.
Yeah.
And I got to do a lot of rehab, so I got to where I could walk along like braces, prove that I could stand up and walk. Wasn't functional, but I could do it. So just that mental part of that for me was a big deal. But I couldn't tell you,
when that
30
happened.
days, 60 days, 90 days into this,
Yeah.
you flip that switch and, it's all good now.
Yeah. How about you, Kenny? Did you remember a time when you realized that it wasn't going to just all go away? It wasn't just going to be fine?
Yeah, I'd say it was probably within those peer mentorship classes that they kind of outline, the window that you've got, 3 years roughly, and the average level of return that people get, talking about 1 or 2 levels of function. Yeah, it was, for me, it was tough to wrap my head around because, I'd be in rehab and they'd have my arm on an arm skate and, they're moving my arm around. They're like, you're doing so good. And I knew I wasn't doing anything. And it felt patronizing at the time, because I'm like, you don't understand. 2 months ago, I was bench pressing 265 pounds. I was running a 5-minute mile, and now, to be right here. And I think it's right when I got into that class and they started talking about just how small the window was and how little the return possibility was. And actually, I ended up not getting any return, visibly. I got enough to get off the ventilator, which is probably the thing I'm most grateful for. But at the time, that wasn't enough. So, that's when it hit me, I think.
Yeah. Do you think that contributed to your depression?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, it's nature of the beast, and so that was the new level I had to adjust to, and that took me a long time. So,
how about you, Lan?
When I was in rehab, every morning the doctors would make their rounds, and it was the physiatrist, the resident who was in charge of me, and a neurosurgeon or neurologist. And I always asked the neurologist, I said, well, when am I going to get movement back? What are the chances that I'll be able to walk? And so he had the statistics. He said I should see something in 2 weeks to 30 days. And so I was counting the days that went by, and I was looking for every little twitch, and it didn't happen. And I can't honestly say I really believed it at that point. I held to the thought for a few months that I was going to get something back, and I watched that. But the more time that went on, the more I realized and accepted that this was going to be my life, and the more I accepted that, the better I started to feel.
Absolutely. You all have talked about relationships being an important part of this adjustment process. And maybe, Doug, I'll start with you. You were in this kind of very early marriage, and how did that change your relationship, or did it? How did your wife help you cope with your injury, and how has that been over time?
It's a big change, because again, we were married for 3 months. So in that, before I broke my neck, in those 3 months, you plan a certain part of your life to go on with, and so it was just different to try to go from being the sole provider for your family and being able to take care of your wife and being able to take care of everything that you needed to do. Again, you're 25 years old and you're an able-bodied man. There's pretty much anything you want to put your mind to, you can do it. So just the whole concept of, well, now somebody's got to take care of me, and how long are they going to have to take care of me? What do you mean I'm never going to walk again, let alone all the other issues that go along with that. So it was a big change for me personally to be able to take that step back and say, okay, I'll stay home and you can go get a job, because who's going to employ me? And that whole concept of, what am I going to do for a living to support my wife, and if we chose to have kids or whatever. So that was different. So that was a big transition and a big difference for me. And we were just recently married, so maybe it was easier in the sense of weren't married for 10 years or 5 years. So there wasn't, well, this is what marriage was like before, and this is what marriage is like afterwards. And I'm not going down that road. So just that sense. But we worked it out and got it. When we had a daughter, I was Mr. Mom. So, I learned to fold the laundry and take care of the kid and change a diaper and that whole thing, until I got to where I could get a job and get functional enough to be able to get around. Because when I first started, I couldn't drive. So when you couldn't driving, you couldn't go get a job. Internet 21 years ago wasn't there. So, so just that whole sense of wrapping your head around what are you going to do and how you're going to support your wife, not even financially, just emotionally and everything else, because it's a major traumatic thing for a family to go through, not just it's just not us three sitting up here that's going through it. It's your whole family. It's affected everybody. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Was your wife initially trained as your caregiver during inpatient rehab?
Yeah, she did it for a little bit.
Yeah.
We didn't want a caregiver in the house.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did that change? I mean, obviously you've become very independent in your functioning, but was your wife your caregiver? I mean, you said she had to go back to work, which means that she couldn't have been totally your caregiver.
Right.
Can you talk about that in terms of your relationship and how her being caregiver and wife?
I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean, ma'am?
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't know where you wanted to draw the line at.
Yeah.
No, she was probably my caregiver in the sense of taking care of me, doing my bowel care and cathing and stuff like that. 4 to 6 months after we left the hospital, probably. Mm-hmm. So, within the first year, I got very lucky in the sense that my fine motor skills came back before my gross motor skills. Mm-hmm. So I could hold my toothbrush, but I couldn't raise my arm. So I could hold the toothbrush, but somebody'd have to hold up my arm so I could brush my teeth to shave and stuff like that. So she did it for a little while, and then my function came back. I got very lucky. Mm-hmm. So just lack of better words, besides being lucky, a lot of hard work, and she didn't want to be the caregiver. Mm-hmm. And some husbands and wives can do that. I'm not saying that they can't. It just totally depends on the personality and the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Lan, you were in the category of having been married for quite a while when you were injured.
Yes.
How long had you guys been married when you were injured?
24 years, I think.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your experience compared to what Doug went through. Was it similar, different?
As far as the caregiving?
The caregiving and how the kind of decisions and things you had to think about in terms of your marriage and all the usual things about work and life and finances. And
certainly. The caregiving was, of course, a big part of it. And I was fortunate in that my wife, while I was in rehab, rolled up her sleeves and learned. She learned everything. She learned how to do it all. And to this day, she still can and will do it all. But I do have a professional caregiver. But for quite a while, she was still better at doing my care than most of the people that we hired. But now we're reaching a point where I can see that it does take away from her, and it tires her, and I get grouchy sometimes too. So it's probably best to give her a break. But we have been fortunate in that we're able to combine that and then still go back to just being who we are. It's a very, I think it's kind of rare, and I don't recommend it, but it works and has worked for us. We did about a year after I got out of rehab, we did start going to a rehab psychologist, and we still see her to this day now, just about every 3 months. And initially, the issues were that my wife didn't want to leave me alone. She worked 2 blocks away from home, but she was coming home at lunch just to make sure I was all right. She didn't trust the caregivers that I had. She wanted to make sure that everything was going all right. So the counselor helped her get past that to where she could have a night out. And at one point she even left town for a week to go back east for a visit. And that was kind of the ultimate development of her gaining that confidence. But then there was also the issue, I didn't want to feel that dependent on her. And the counselor helped me see that, well, look, you are kind of dependent a little more than you used to be, so get used to it. And it's not a bad thing. Dependency is not a dirty word. And
right.
So it helped me accept that. And so I feel like we've reached a pretty healthy balance in working that out. And then of course there were the other issues, the stresses of finances and going back to work, finding a job, and dealing with all of those other things. But it was rough for a while, but in time they settled down.
Excellent. So Kenny, you weren't married, but you had your family with you, but similar issues about starting with kind of your mom as your caregiver, right?
Yeah. So 23. I was about, was in a 6-month relationship. I think it made it another 6 months after the injury, and I think I was still in Harborview on the ventilator when the doctors and nurses came in and asked my folks where I was going after rehab, and they said home, and the doctor's like, they don't go home. My family's like, watch us. And like Lance said, my mom rolled up her sleeves, and so did my dad, and they dove in, and really learned the care. But I think for my situation and for my mom, it ended up enabling my depression more. We've had long talks about it in the years since, but she did everything for me. She made my phone calls, made my appointments, sent my emails, all that stuff. And so it really, I didn't know it at the time, and she didn't know it either. I mean, you're doing the best you can with what you've got. But yeah, it really kind of hamstrung a little bit of my own acceptance, I think, because I didn't really take much ownership of my own situation. I really, you come home feeling like a 6-month-old when you have to have your mom do everything for you, bowel care and, everything else. And so, I think it was a lot of the denial that just kind of, I wanted to just hide behind it and not really deal with it. And, it wasn't until we finally got some separation in the last few years that we both can look back on it and see that, it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for her either, because she was, I got home and, she was sleeping standing up outside my bedroom door because I'd call her every 15 seconds. And, and to watch it take its toll on my parents' marriage and also, my sister and everybody else that, like Doug said, that, our injuries affect everybody involved. It really is kind of like that mobile above a kid's bed that one person makes a shift and the entire family goes spinning. And so, it was a lot for us to wrap our heads around, but, it may have taken us a while, but I think we're in a good place now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the interconnectedness, and I would imagine, Doug, you were young enough, were your parents involved or not to, or extended, or your in-laws, were they as tightly involved, or kind of you and your wife just managed things?
My parents were very involved, and basically, we lived on 2 different houses on the same property. So, my house that I was living in at the time didn't have a bathroom that it was accessible, so you had to go to my parents' house to use the bathroom and to take a shower. So it was definitely taxing in that sense. And you've got a new wife of 3 months, and you've got a mother of 25 years. We'll leave it at there. How about that?
We'll talk about that. Did
sure.
you have to
to
help
leave it,
that
she'll
work
still
it
go
out? Did you have to work that out, or did you really let your wife and your mom work that out?
I would think that my wife and my mom worked it out. It was, again, it's a traumatic thing for the whole family, for people to go through what we have and the other people that are out there. So it's everybody takes that grieving time and that depression time, to deal with what you've got to deal with. And they've got to wrap their heads around it as much as you do. And your parents, and in my situation, my parents and my wife needed to figure out where that line was in the sand of where they're going to be a parent and where they're going to be a parent with a child with a disability, whether it's a born disability or one that's just came about. So it was just a little different for the family. It was rough. We'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Did any of you, it sounds like, Kenny, your mom also struggled with depression as well through that period, but, and Lan, you mentioned that you and your wife went to counseling early. Did you worry about your wife's mood and your wife's adjustment?
Yes, absolutely. I was very concerned. Her world changed pretty radically, and that I think she looked at me as a source of support or emotional support, and she didn't want to give that up, and I think that's what she conveyed to me. She said that she still wanted me to be that person, but she was afraid, and she struggled for a while with sleeping, which normally she sleeps endlessly, but so I actually had to get some help a little bit to get some good nights of sleep, and she came to the hospital, spent just about every night at the hospital when I was in rehab, and so she had some recovery as well, and the counseling, I think going to the counseling really did help her a lot, and to this day the psychologist is her advocate, I think, in this whole process, and she does say that I'm even a little nicer to be around than I was before.
Excellent. Doug, I realize we haven't talked much about kind of your exposure. I know you had mentioned that during inpatient rehab you had psychology available to you. Over time, have you sought out counselors and actually sought out professionals that to help with anything over time?
Yeah, I've talked to them, and I think they're a great thing when, give you somebody that's gonna just take it in and give you an opinion on the way out, and not one that's family related, so they're standing on the outside looking in. And I think it's a great thing in that sense. We haven't done any marriage counseling, that type of thing, but yeah, I've talked to psychologists before, and I think it helps get your mind wrapped around, give you a professional's opinion of, okay, think about it this way.
Yeah. Did you have to, I know Kenny had early experience as somebody that you didn't match well with, and that's not uncommon. Did you have that, Doug? Did you have to look around a little bit to find people that you connected with, or did you just have kind of good luck of finding somebody who was understanding of your spinal cord injury, but also could help with the issue that you were kind of dealing with, whether it had anything to do with your spinal cord injury or not?
No, I didn't have any, I didn't go to Harborview. That's where I did the rehab. So, I didn't go back to Harborview to ask anybody. So I just ran across a counselor at St. Luke's that I liked, and we got along well. So I just went that direction.
Yeah.
So it went easy for me in that way.
Yeah, I was going to say another rehab facility in Spokane.
In Spokane.
Yeah. Kenny, how about you? I know that you said that you did eventually find somebody. Did having experience or understanding spinal cord injury, was that even necessary or useful for you? Was that something you even looked for?
It wasn't.
Ready?
Yeah, for me, I've kind of taken a really roundabout way as far as my recovery has gone emotionally. Is that when I lost a family member to drugs and alcohol, and that got me to really seek out help for that. And it was by seeing a counselor, and I've been seeing her for the last 4.5 years, that by dealing with some of those emotions around losing somebody in my family, that have kind of brought me around full circle to where I've really taken a look at how I approach my relationship with myself, because I was really kind of focused on all the relationships that I was having and that, but now it's kind of got me back to the core of looking at how I approach life, from the chair and as a chair user. So
yeah, has it also changed the way you relate to your body and self-care of your body too?
Yeah, I think so. I think when I look back over the years and the not only the disservice I did to myself by not kind of being my own advocate, but to my family as well. Because I as much as my mom enabled my depression, I enabled hers by not getting my own help. By not realizing that all I need is my voice to be able to direct my own care, and yeah, now I'm fully in charge of myself, and it's nice, and it's, yeah, I've got my mom back in mom role, and she's not a caregiver, and yeah, I think it's helped all of us a lot. So
Yeah. And Lan, if I remember correctly, you had a bit of a struggle to find somebody when you were looking for a psychologist initially. Is that accurate? Once you were discharged.
That is correct. It was a full year after I was discharged, and it was on my mind that would be a really good thing to do, because we had been exposed to counseling, and there's no question that I knew we were dealing with many emotions and could use some counseling. But there were a lot of other things on our plate that came before it, and so it's easy for me to put it off, because I tend to be that way anyway. But then when we did start asking around and to find a counselor, we did struggle to get through the system. We hadn't exactly learned how to use the rehab system, the healthcare system, and I think we called the receptionist here, and the information we got was that they were all full up, they were not available, and we were given the names of 3 people who were outside their independent private psychologists, and we called them, and they said, we don't really do this. and then I think actually I emailed the nurse practitioner who worked with you folks, and she got me connected through. So there are ways, if a person learns how to communicate, that she got me started right up.
Yeah. So I'm also curious about, how did peers and being around other people with spinal cord injury change how you related to your injury, how you related to other people? Was that important in your adjustment? Let's start with Doug.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's a huge difference. When I was inpatient, I was comparing myself, being a high-level quad, to a T12 para. He'd go, well, here's how you get up from the floor, grabs his chair, pushes himself up, 20 years old, So in that sense, it's just trying to figure out where you fit into it, and what you could, your other people that were functional like you were, and then learning whether it's a sport that you like to play, or go out and do certain things that person likes to do. So you just want to find that camaraderie, that works well with everybody. What fits in that sense of it. So you have somebody to talk about. I think wheelchair sports are great in that sense. Most of the guys on the team or in the court can understand what a bad day is. They can show you, well, here's how you show a C5-6 quad, how to get in and out of a car. This is how I do it. Instead of inpatient, you've got therapists showing you. Not necessarily. And most people are so weak when they first get injured to be able to show them, their potential of what they're going to be able to do in the future. So peer counseling is great.
Yeah, I was going to say, so early, and then you kind of continuously after that.
Yeah.
How about you, Kenny? You talked a little bit about kind of that early peer experience that wasn't exactly super helpful at the time. It wasn't when you were ready for it. But at what point did it take? Because I think we've talked a bit in the past about kind of not wanting to be a member of that club.
Oh yeah, for me, I mean, it's my path has been a little bit different, because at C3-4 there's not as much wheelchair sports out there. There's not rugby for power chairs. There's not basketball and stuff like that. So the higher level you get, the harder it is to find someone in similar shoes. And I'd never really seen anyone like that, and I don't think I was really interested in seeing someone like that. For me, the denial was that thick for years, that I didn't want to see anybody in a chair, because you don't understand who I was before and who I am now. And it changed for me on, I think it was about January of 2010. when I was at a Kiwanis fundraiser, and up rolls this guy. He's a C5-6 in a power chair, and this was right in the middle of when I was battling pressure sores, and he asked me about the ride cushion, if I'd ever heard of it. And his name was Dan McConnell. He was about 40 years post. Him and his wife had been together since he was hurt. He was 19, she was 17, and she did all of his care for the first probably 35 years. And just having that one conversation with him kind of turned everything for me. And seeing how their relationship worked and how you could still get out there and do life, it was kind of mind-blowing for me. And to find out about the ride cushion and have that basically fix all of my problems with pressure sores, that was probably the biggest connection I'd made. And from then on, it was like, okay, my doctors, my therapists, they're obviously not telling me about these things. I need to get next to people that have been where I've been. And so I've kind of, that's been my thing ever since. I'm always looking for somebody to teach me something new. Mm-hmm. So,
That's great. Anything else, Lan? I know you had early contact with peers, and you've kind of stayed connected throughout. Is that accurate?
That's true to a point. I'd almost forgotten that the first few months after I left the hospital, that I was at home for a while. I did have a pressure sore, mm-hmm. and we were on a different health plan, and we had home care. There was a nurse and a couple of therapists that are physical and occupational therapists that were making visits to home, and they didn't want me to go into rehab and outpatient rehab and start doing physical therapy until my pressure sore healed. Mm-hmm. But the point that did happen, I then connected with UW Rehab and the Transitions program and started getting involved. And from that point on, I knew that there was so much to learn mm-hmm. from peers, and so we've kind of just become part of every opportunity to connect with other people, and it's a part of our life. We've made friends. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So the title of tonight's talk is Getting to Normal. And that's, I think actually it's something that you said to me when we talked earlier, Lan. Can you remind me, how long did it take for you to have it become normal? To become that being in a wheelchair was just part of what day-to-day life looked like?
It was a gradual process. And I think early on I thought I felt abnormal, like at first all the time, and maybe a month later 90% of the time, and a year later maybe 60% of the time. But now on a good day I don't think about it at all. I go through maybe days without really thinking about, I'm abnormal, I'm in a wheelchair. But sometimes I do. Sometimes it hits me, and I go, oh yeah, this is a drag, man. Wouldn't it be nice to be out doing the things? But I don't think about that very often.
Mm-hmm. So now it's most of the time it's just normal.
Most of the time I just go through my day.
Yeah. How about you, Kenny?
Yeah, I think it took probably 8 or 9 years for me to even accept what new normal was going to look like. But now, I was just hanging out with a few of my buddies that are high-level quads, and we were talking about this specific thing last night. And it's like, I'll go, days, weeks where it's just what I do. I'm on the computer, I'm on the road, I'm doing whatever I have to do. It took me a long time, but I forget now. I just forget that I'm in a chair. I just have stuff that I have to do. I've got to, I might have to drive around a few extra places to get where I need to go, but it's just business as usual now, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Cool.
I couldn't tell you a time. It's not been that long, but it seems like it. Yeah, it's just like normal. It's just you wake up in the morning, you roll over, and there's your chair, and sit up on the side of the bed, and Like, till everything relaxes enough to pick yourself up and throw yourself in your chair and make the day happen. You know, life is what you make it. So it's just a matter of getting used to it and moving on.
So, you know, I warned you all, I want you to give advice to other people. I don't know who wants to start. Doug, do you want to? Kenny wants to. Kenny, what advice would you give to somebody who's struggling early after spinal cord injury? What advice? What do you think would be the thing to help them, to move them forward?
Well, I'd tell them to be patient with themselves. You know, I got trapped in that kind of the machine you get in when you get into the hospital, that they say that, you know, by X amount of months you're going to be doing this. By X amount of years, this is when, you know, so-called acceptance is going to happen. I remember, my mom had read something about, you know, have 5 years, high-level quads, kind of get back out into the world, and that was not the case for me. And so I think that heaped on even more, you know, guilt and pressure with myself, because I'm an athlete and I'm a competitor, and I always wanted to be ahead of the curve. And for the first time to find myself behind the curve, it was maddening. And so I would say, you know, unfortunately this takes time, but it does get better. And so if you can give yourself as much grace as possible, that, you know, this stuff takes time. Whenever I meet somebody and I give them my card, I'm like, if I don't hear from you for a decade, I get it, because that's how long it took me. Most people, it doesn't take as long as I do. You know, a lot of people, you know, I've met people that are way higher level than me that are out in 10% of the time, you know, and that's great for them. But it's just taught me that, you know, I'm not losing just because I took a little bit longer than somebody else. So,
what advice would you give to family and friends?
Oh, I'd say get help. You know, I would absolutely say get help. That the more help you can get, the more, you know, it's good for everybody, because it gives separation for, you know, the family members, because you get enmeshed really, really quickly. And, it helps to get your family members rest. It helps to get, you know, the newly injured person some semblance of independence and how to direct their own care. And, but also just, you know, that grace for them as well, that there is no manual for this stuff. You know, they want to hand out these books, but that doesn't mean anything, you know, because you've got to figure out what's normal for you. Just because, you know, I go through this with new caregivers. If they have spinal cord injury experience and they think they can come in and show me what they've done with their other clients, that's not how it works. This is my system. This is how I change my shirt. This is how I get into the chair, into bed, and it takes time to develop those systems, I think.
What advice would you give to rehab professionals?
Anyone?
Run quick.
Yeah. No, you know, it's and to listen to the patients. I'd probably say listen to the patients first, you know, because I've even butted heads with, you know, I'm doing peer mentorship myself, and I caught a medical professional inside one of the classes. One of the newly injured patients asked, "Is there websites out there? Are there things, you know, are there resources?" And she said, "I'm your resource." And I was like, "No, you're not." Yeah, you know, and it's to, you know, because I mean the kicker for me is as well intentioned as people are in the medical field, it's not their life. You know, everybody still goes home, they get off work and they check out. You know, for everybody in chairs and their families, it's their life. You know, and so we become the experts a lot quicker than most people. So I'd say, leave a little room for those experts, I guess.
Doug, are you ready?
No, but go ahead.
Well, I can make Lan go first.
It doesn't matter.
All right, Lan, what is your advice for people with new injuries, new spinal cord injury?
With new spinal cord injury, to give it time, to be hopeful, to be patient, as Kenny said, to take advantage of the many resources. There's a tremendous amount of information. There's a lot of help, a lot of great people to know and to work with, to take advantage of all the support that's available.
And to family and friends.
That's critical, especially for spouse, partner, closest, significant other. That person really needs to take care of themselves and not to become a victim of the injury itself. That can happen, and it's a very serious problem, because if they start slipping, then the spinal cord person is in a world of hurt as well. So they've got to look out for themselves. Very important.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to rehab professionals?
Rehab professionals, I've been so impressed with the rehab professionals I've met. I have in any other specialty, I've not met so many people who are really knowledgeable and helpful and caring about what they do, and to keep doing what they're doing. And I do remember that my physical therapist and inpatient always had lots of good jokes and stories, and so keep the laughter lively.
That's good. All right, Doug. So
Nobody else?
Yeah, no, you're it. So your advice to people with newer injuries, and I know you do this. You do some early peer mentoring too. I think all three of you do. But what advice do you give to help with that adjustment and kind of taking care of yourself and mood after spinal cord injury?
To give it time. Don't get focused on you're going to get the most function back in the first year or the first 6 months. Give it some time. Everybody's a little bit different. You don't know what. I don't like a timeline in the sense of that you only got 6 months and then, kidding with the 5 years, It all depends on your personality and what you are dealing with on the inside and on the outside. There's circumstances that change everything to that certain amount of time. So don't let the number get in the way of what you are. Don't let your level of injury, like Lan, C6, 7 quad could be in a power chair forever, or he can be in a manual chair forever. It just depends on what function, and what they do with their body in that sense. And then the other part is find out something that you like to do. What is it? I don't if it's wheelchair sports, if it's playing video games, if it's watching your favorite cooking show. What is it? Find that one thing that makes you happy, that you can look forward to once a week, once a month, whatever it is. Is it going having a drink with your friend? Is it having dinner with your girlfriend? I get paid on the 5th, so we get to go to dinner on the 6th. People that live on a limited budget, that's at least something to look forward to. And so I think that everybody needs something to look forward to, whether you're an able-bodied person or somebody in a chair. You just got to have that one thing that you're striving towards.
Yeah. So advice to friends and family?
Be as patient as you can for yourself and for the person that's going through what they are. Because in that, again, it's just time. Just because you think that it should, that person should snap out of it and be ready to go back to work next week, maybe they're not ready to. Don't put that limit time. Give them some patience, give them some time. But on the other hand, don't enable them too much. Make them do what they can for themselves. Yes, ma'am.
And to rehab professionals.
Run quick.
Oh, come on. What advice do you have for all of us rehab professionals?
That it's as much as the book shows you what we're all about, everybody's going to be different, and you can't put a value on experience. You're going to deal with, you got 3 different quadriplegics up here with 3 different levels of function. We could be 3 C5, 6 quads sitting up here, and each one of us is going to be different. So just push the individual as much as you can without over pushing them. Make them work as hard as they can do, and again, it depends on what their basic personality is, how far you can push it, and you guys learn that pretty quick. People like Kenny, you can just push them all the time.
Now you can.
Interesting.
Early, yeah. So those are my questions. How about questions from the audience? What questions do you all have for these three guys?
I was wondering if you think sleep affected your mood or depression a lot, especially in the early stages.
I can say mine did. Yeah, I was in the college mode of staying up till 2, 3 in the morning when I got hurt. But then, I was one of those that I would sleep every third day. After I got hurt, I might get 2 to 3 hours, and so getting that rest and there's so many things that play a factor into that: sleep, nutrition, and developing a routine, all that stuff. But yeah, for me, sleep. I sleep really good now. I don't know what changed, but yeah, for a long time I didn't sleep at all. Well,
Either of you guys?
Yes, we had a forum a couple of years ago on sleep disturbance, and they said that 30% of the normal population have some form of sleep disturbance, and chances are that's a little higher for spinal cord people. And so, I had something of an insomniac pretty much all my life. I like to drink a lot of coffee and all those things. And so I think I've had to work a little harder at getting a good night's sleep, to cut the coffee off a little sooner, and try to make sure and get good exercise and fresh air so that I can really maximize my opportunities for sleep. And it's probably about the same as it was before, or even a little better than it was.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, sleep and mood go very hand in hand.
It sounds like much of the help you're getting is sort of a psychological counseling nature. Did you have trouble getting practical advice, specific tangibles tailored to your specific injury?
Well, I could say, for me, similar to, getting next to people that have been where you've been, was initially, my mom would come to the forum and not see people of my level here. And so that's kind of where I've taken it. I'm like, okay, I've got to be the guy that's here now. So you see a high level quad, something like that. But yeah, it wasn't, I just met I've got a whole crew we call the Quad Squad, that I met a guy that was introducing me to different ways of using the computer that I'd never heard of. And I was, I'm a stubborn guy, and I find one thing that works and I stick with it. But when you start getting next to somebody that is in the exact same situation as you, or somewhere close, you really start to learn, that what they might use might work for you. And yeah, it's really helped me a lot.
When I was an inpatient toward the end, they did arrange for a visit by a peer mentor, and he had pretty close to the same level, maybe even identical function, and he came in. He although had been injured quite some time before, and he came in and told me about, he understood what I was feeling physically and mentally, and that there is progress and those things would change. But he talked about, well, I drove over here today, and hinted, well, you can do that too if you want. And everybody said, well, driving will be a good thing for you to do. And so that seemed pretty far off, but it turned out to be a reality. I do drive now and can leave the little woman behind and take off into the sunset. So that's pretty fun way of feeling independent at my level. And so it was something available to me, and he told me about it. I do remember, I talked about dropping my can of Ensure, and when he was leaving, he gave me his business card, and he was fumbling with them as I would do, and he actually dropped the first one on the floor, and I said, I was thinking, thank you for dropping that. I'm so tired of dropping things. And so, but he did get another one out, and he kept at it, and that's kind of what we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious if you guys had any connections to the disabled community before your guys' accidents, or did all of your connections come post-accident?
I knew one C56 quad, and he wasn't very happy with being in the chair. So I really thought life was going to be very difficult if you're ever in a chair. So that was the only person I knew, and he was not very happy with being in a chair. He's better today, much better.
Christopher Reed. It's the only person I'd seen. I'd never seen a power chair like this before I got hurt. I'd seen a couple people at school in manual chairs, but yeah, I had no connections whatsoever.
I have to say now that I am a person of disability, I expect the world around me to know and understand as much as they can about it. But before I was like this, I didn't pay that much attention to it. And I'm sorry that I didn't. I would have liked to have done more.
Would you join me in thanking them for being here tonight?
Thank you for listening to the SCI Forum podcast. To learn more or to make a donation, please visit sci.org.